Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. May peace be upon all of you, my fellow learners, professionals, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the corporate series. And in this particular video, we're going to address something quite important, which is basically on how can you face racism or some form of divisionalism that you see in your company. I have some interesting points to share with you. We're going to look at this video in two parts. The first part is going to be quite optimistic, quite positive. The first point I want to share with you is that you must identify individuals who have racial tendencies and always deal with them professionally and courteously. Now, this is very important but tough, and you won't be able to do it without experience. You must have had connections with a lot of people, having worked for several years, and even during those years you must have observed how people behave, because sometimes these tendencies are so far down there, so far deep, that they don't really show until something triggers. Like, for example, when I was working in Sri Lanka after the Easter attacks that happened in 2019, a very unfortunate bombing incident that was mostly connected to the religion of Islam, and it was actually used as a tool and a propaganda to create a phobia about Islam that has affected Muslims in this country heavily. Even today, even myself, I'm facing certain repercussions because of that. But until that incident happened, there were many people in the companies that I was working for who I never thought were racist. But then it happened, and after that, the conversations, the behaviors, the way they treat certain individuals, the way they comment, and the jokes they make start showing that these people were actually people who have always had racial biases but didn't really have any reason to put them out. Finally, when they find the reason, it's out there. So it takes some time, which means that you have to be a little smart, you have to be a little careful, you have to be a good observer to be able to identify these individuals. And the most important thing is for you to always deal with them professionally and courteously. Professionalism and courtesy is extremely important, especially in the corporate sector. We talk about integrity, objectivity, but more than all of that, when you deal with people, dealing with them in a gentle manner, it's quite critical, and it can actually pave the way to influencing those individuals to get out of their racial tendencies. The second point I have to offer you is, now if this person shows a capability of logical understanding, basic logic, you can try to develop a working relationship, and you can discuss certain ideas that may treat his or her racist tendencies. Now, not something that is very easy, and that is why I have a disclaimer to say that you must do this only from a very, very neutral standpoint. If you are a Muslim, for example, like myself, you can't go into that conversation from a Muslim's perspective. You must always stand on neutral grounds. And someone who is not racist, someone who doesn't have racial bias, is normally someone capable of dealing with any situation, dealing with different people from a neutral standpoint. And so don't misunderstand this. This is very dangerous because people have their own faiths, people follow their own religions. There's Hinduism, there's Buddhism, there's Islam, there's Christianity, there's Judaism, etc. So just because one person has that faith and is following the tenets of that faith very carefully, very devoutly, doesn't mean that person is a racist. In fact, it is very likely that if a person is following their religious tenets precisely, correctly, because from what I understand about Buddhism, from what I understand about Christianity, Islam specifically being my religion, all these religions say something very critical. It's that do not demarcate, do not divide. Even if another person doesn't follow your own faith, doesn't believe, you have no right to disrespect. From a Muslim's standpoint, I can quote the Quranic verse to you. It says, Lakum deenukum waliyadeen, which is, to you is your religion, to me is my religion. That is the fundamental basis that Muslims approach this. So always make sure that you are someone who can approach a conversation from a neutral standpoint. And also, another skill that you must have is you should be able to communicate ideas, peaceful ideas, very clearly. Today we see a lot of issues in the world just because people don't use the right words. People are unable to control their temper. People are unable to go into a long conversation, 5 minutes, 10 minutes into it, they lose their cool. I myself, back in the day, I can tell you from my own experiences where, in certain cases, I haven't reacted very well. I wish I had. So, especially to young professionals, to those of you who are between 20 to 30 years old, I'm telling you, this is a great opportunity, because if you do that, if you are able to approach a conversation from a neutral standpoint, and if you are able to communicate peaceful ideas clearly, it will have a huge impact in the long term of your stability, of the career that you're trying to build for yourself. The next point I have is you must always exemplify and spread the message that all professionals are, end of the day, human beings, and that every human being deserves to be respected regardless of country, ethnicity, religion, race, color, caste, gender, etc. In fact, some of these words themselves, the existence of these words themselves, have been the seed for racism. So we need to kind of, for example, caste, color, race, these kind of words are not very positive. These kind of words are the beginning of racist tendencies. But somehow, the idea is that you must always look at every other professional in your company, senior, junior, it doesn't matter. Whatever their differences may be, when you compare them to you, you must always look at them first and foremost as a human being, as a fellow human being. Only if you do that, at some point, even if there is someone who is racist, they will, if you treat them as a human being, they will feel it. And at some point in the future, maybe short term, maybe long term, maybe 20 years later, they will treat another person just because you treated them as a human being. They will decide that they also need to treat another person as a human being. So always make sure that you exemplify and spread this idea. As a young professional, you will be in a follower's position. But if you imbue this in your character, in your personality, as time flies by, you will realize that when you get into leadership positions, it gives you a great amount of power and ability, capability to influence people. And always make sure that you stand up for yours and your team members' rights, but do it diplomatically, regardless of whether your team members have racist tendencies or not. So this is a very critical idea. And this is something, even in my personal experience, I have had several managers who haven't really gone along with this, who have always had biases. Some biases are performance and merit based, which is perhaps maybe fine because they want to get the job done. But if there are biases, particularly with respect to racial tendencies, racist tendencies, that is definitely not something I would recommend. So make sure that when you stand up for someone's rights, when you're asking, when you're fighting for someone's rights, and you should do that at early on, you should always, and for yourself also, you should be able to have the courage to stand up for yourself. When you do that, don't have any biases, don't show any racistic tendencies yourself. Always treat everyone equally. Even if you have a team member who is racist and who is misbehaving with you, who is affecting you negatively, but if you are fighting for your team's rights, do not harm that person. Do not marginalize that person. Be equal, be common, be a good leader. Those are the points I have to offer. Will come back to you with the second part of this video later. Thank you very much for being part of the journey. Assalamu alaikum. May peace be upon all of you and all your loved ones.